He had everything: money, power, a stunning woman by his side. But in one moment, his entire world shifted. The past he thought he left behind was sitting just a few tables away, carrying a secret that would change everything. And when the truth came out, it shattered everything he believed about himself. What happened next will leave you speechless. Eyes, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. Now, let's dive into this unbelievable story. The soft hum of a grand piano dances through the air, its delicate notes weaving seamlessly with the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. Dim candlelight flickers across pristine white tablecloths, casting golden reflections against polished silverware. The air is laced with the scent of aged wine, freshly seared steak, and the subtle, intoxicating perfume of the elite. And then, he enters. Damien Sinclair, a man who commands attention without asking for it. A billionaire, a self-made titan of industry, whose very presence shifts the energy in the room. Dressed in a tailored black suit, its fabric hugging the sharp lines of his sculpted frame, he moves with effortless confidence, power radiating from every step, every glance, every calculated breath. His hand rests possessively on the waist of the woman beside him, Sophia Bennett. Young, breathtaking, the kind of beauty that turns heads and stirs whispers. She smiles up at him, oblivious to the weight he carries, unaware of the ghosts that lurk in the corners of his mind. To the world, Damien Sinclair has it all: power, wealth, a stunning woman on his arm, a life meticulously controlled, perfect, impeccable, unshakable. At least, that's what he believes. Then, he sees her. It happens in an instant, a moment so small, so fleeting, yet it detonates inside him like an explosion, ripping through the carefully constructed walls of his reality. A woman, a familiar silhouette, a face he thought he'd buried in the past. Emily. His breath catches, his pulse spikes. The world, so carefully orchestrated, begins to blur at the edges. She sits just a few tables away, her delicate fingers wrapped around a porcelain teacup. The candlelight kisses the soft curve of her face, highlighting the familiar warmth in her eyes, the warmth he once knew better than his own reflection. His ex-wife, the woman he once loved, the woman he let walk away, the woman he hasn't seen in over a year. 1,000 memories crash through him at once. The late-night whispers, the way she used to fit perfectly in his arms, the way she looked at him, not with admiration for his wealth, not with hunger for his power, but with something far deeper, something real. But then his eyes drop lower, and that's when he sees it. Her stomach, rounded, full, the undeniable curve of pregnancy. His body turns to stone, the air in his lungs vanishes. No, that's not possible. It can't be possible. A slow, creeping horror spreads through his chest. The timing. His mind races. His thoughts twist into chaotic knots. He counts the months, the days, every second since their last encounter, since their final goodbye. And the realization slams into him like a freight train. Unless a deep, primal instinct claws at his insides. His grip on Sophia tightens involuntarily, enough that she shifts uncomfortably. Damien, she murmurs, her voice laced with confusion. But he doesn't respond. He can't, because in that moment, nothing else exists. Not the restaurant, not the music, not even the woman beside him. Only Emily. Only the unshakable, gut-wrenching certainty that he's staring at the one thing money can't buy, the one thing power can't control. And it might just belong to him. His mind is a battlefield, thoughts colliding, memories clawing their way to the surface. He hasn't seen Emily since the divorce, a year ago. A whole year, 12 months, 52 weeks, 365 days. And not once did he hear from her. Not a call, not a message, not even a whispered rumor of her whereabouts. It was as if she had vanished, swallowed whole by the silence. He should have moved on. No, he had moved on, hadn't he? His life had continued, seamless and uninterrupted. Deals were made. Profits soared. He stood at the top of the world, untouchable, unstoppable. And yet, here he was utterly unraveled at the sight of her. His jaw tightens. His grip on the stem of his wine glass is ironclad. Steady, Damien. Control. But there is no control now. Because Emily is pregnant. His breath is shallow, his pulse erratic. The world around him continues. Laughter, chatter, the clinking of silverware against porcelain. But it feels distant, muted, as if he is underwater, drowning in the suffocating weight of his own thoughts. This isn't possible. Yet, the proof is undeniable. The delicate curve of her belly. The protective way her hand hovers over it, absent-mindedly. The quiet exhaustion in her eyes. It haunts him. And then another thought strikes, more violent than the last. She left without a fight. She didn't contest the divorce. She didn't argue over the assets. She simply walked away. He won. The house. The cars. The wealth. Everything. But as he stares at her now, alone and pregnant, a dark, harrowing realization gnaws at him. What if he lost something far more precious? Damien? A soft voice drags him back. Sophia. She watches him, her brows knitting together in confusion. She tilts her head, her perfectly curled hair cascading over her shoulder. Are you okay? He blinks, forces a smile, a well-rehearsed reflex, a mask he has worn for years. I'm fine, he lies. But inside? Inside, his world is crumbling. He dares another glance toward Emily. She doesn't see him. Or maybe she does, and she simply refuses to acknowledge him. Either way, she remains unmoved, detached, as if he's a stranger. But they weren't strangers, were they? They were once something more. And suddenly, he is no longer in the restaurant. He is in the past. It had been different once. He remembers the way she used to look at him, like he was more than just a man with money, more than just a name on a Forbes list. To her, he had been Damien, not the billionaire, not the CEO, just Damien. He remembers their late-night drives, wind whipping through their hair as they sped down empty highways, laughing, lost in their own world. He remembers how she used to wake up first, curling against him in the morning light, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his chest as she whispered, "I love you." And he remembers the end, the cold courtroom, the way she sat across from him, silent, her face unreadable. The way she didn't fight when the lawyers presented their case, when the division of assets was announced, when the papers were signed. She had simply accepted it, accepted defeat, accepted loss. And then she walked away. No words, no tears, just silence. It had infuriated him. He had expected rage, resistance, a plea. Instead, she had given him nothing. And now here she was, carrying a secret that should have been his to know. The restaurant comes back into focus. But he is no longer the same man who walked in just minutes ago. Something is wrong. Something is terribly, horribly wrong. Because this wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. Emily pregnant alone. She had left him with nothing. But what if the truth had been stolen from him? His stomach tightens. He can't look away. And deep down, he knows this night is only the beginning. The restaurant feels smaller now. The walls seem closer, the air heavier. Every sound, every distant murmur of conversation, every clink of glass, every soft note of the grand piano is nothing more than a ghostly hum in Damien's ears. Because all he can hear is the thunderous pounding of his own heartbeat. His body moves before his mind catches up. One step, then another. The chair scrapes against the polished floor as he stands, but Sophia's voice barely reaches him. Damien, where are you going? He doesn't answer, because nothing else matters now. All he sees, all he can see, is Emily, sitting there, unaware, unprotected, and pregnant. His feet carry him forward, past elegantly dressed guests, past flickering candlelight and shimmering chandeliers. And then she looks up, their eyes meet, and the world stops. A second stretches into eternity. Her expression is unreadable at first, a mix of surprise and something deeper, something buried beneath the surface. But then something flickers. Fear. A small, almost imperceptible flicker of fear in her eyes. And it shreds through him like a blade. Why? Why is she afraid? He had expected shock, maybe discomfort. But fear? His pulse quickens. The unease that had been gnawing at his chest grows, twisting into something darker. He swallows hard. His voice, when it finally comes, is hoarse, Unsteady. Emily. She blinks, inhaling sharply, as if hearing him say her name physically hurt her. Damien, you shouldn't be here. The words land like a slap. You shouldn't be here. Not how have you been? Not what are you doing here? Not I didn't expect to see you. No. She says he shouldn't be here. And suddenly, the heaviness in his chest transforms into something else entirely. Doubt. Suspicion. Rage. He steps closer, lowering his voice. But there's an edge to it now, a sharpness he can't contain. Is it mine? The question hangs between them, thick and suffocating. Emily's breath catches. And then, hesitation. Not denial. Not an immediate, firm, resounding no. Just hesitation. A split second. A moment too long. And that's all it takes. His heart lurches. His stomach twists. She won't look at him. She won't answer. The silence says more than words ever could. But before she can speak, a sharp, pained gasp rips from her lips. Her hand flies to her stomach. Her entire body tenses. Her face contorts. Something is wrong. Emily. Her fingers clutch the fabric of her dress, knuckles turning white. A slow, creeping panic spreads across her face. The room tilts. Everything blurs. She's in pain. Damien doesn't think, he just moves. His hands reach for her, steadying her before she can collapse. Emily. Look at me. What's wrong? Her breathing is uneven, her shoulders trembling. I don't know, she chokes out. Terror grips him. Real terror. Not the kind born from business deals gone wrong. Not the fleeting panic of a stock crash or a failed investment. No, this is different. This is real. She winces again. A strangled sound escapes her lips. And suddenly, nothing else matters. Not the questions. Not the past. Not even the unbearable weight of the truth he hasn't fully grasped yet. Because right now, all that matters is her. And the life she carries. And for the first time in his life, Damien Sinclair, a man who has spent years controlling every single outcome, is completely, utterly powerless. Chaos. Pure, unrelenting chaos. The restaurant is a blur of gasps, panicked whispers, and startled waitstaff frozen in shock. But Damien hears none of it. The only sound that matters is Emily's ragged breathing. The only sight that matters is her fragile frame, trembling in his arms. Stay with me, he murmurs, but it's not a command, it's a plea. Her lips part as if she wants to respond, but no words come. Only pain. And then, in the distance, sirens. The piercing wail of an ambulance, cutting through the night like a warning, like a reckoning. They're running now. Paramedics, gloved hands, rapid voices. A stretcher appears, and suddenly, she's being lifted away from him. No, no, he can't let her go. His fingers tighten around her wrist for just a second, just long enough for her eyes to flicker open. A whisper. Damien. Then, she's gone, strapped to a stretcher, wheeled away, disappearing into flashing red and blue lights. His feet move before his mind can catch up. He follows, because there is no other option. There never was. The ambulance rocks, jolting against the city streets, but Damien doesn't notice. He's inside, beside her, gripping the edge of the seat, so tightly his knuckles burn white. Emily lies still, her breathing shallow, her skin pale as snow under the harsh fluorescent lights. The paramedics speak in clipped, urgent tones, medical jargon spilling from their lips, but none of it makes sense to him. Because he is drowning. Drowning in the unbearable sight of her like this. Drowning in a suffocating storm of emotions he's spent years suppressing. And then, just like that, he forgets Sophia exists. The woman waiting at their table, the expensive dinner, the carefully curated image of his perfect life. None of it matters anymore. Because all he can see is Emily. And the secret she kept from him. The truth he never saw coming. His throat tightens. He was supposed to have control. Over everything. Every deal. Every outcome. Every part of his life. But this? This was the first time in years that life had taken the reins from his hands. And for the first time, he was afraid. Bright lights. The sharp scent of antiseptic. The echo of hurried footsteps on sterile tile floors. She's rushed through double doors before he can stop them. Before he can ask the question clawing at his throat. Is she going to be okay? No answer. The door swings shut, a barrier between them, between him and the one thing he never thought he'd lose. His hands clench into fists. The feeling is unbearable, this waiting, this powerlessness. A nurse speaks to him, her voice firm but kind. "Sir, you need to wait outside." But waiting is impossible, because in the depths of his soul, he knows everything is about to change. Minutes stretch into eternity. Then, a sound, soft at first like a distant drumbeat, steady, rhythmic, alive. It pulses through the hospital hallway, through the cold clinical walls. His heart stops, because he knows exactly what it is. A heartbeat, not Emily's, not his own, but theirs, his child. His knees nearly give out. The realization slams into him with an unrelenting force, shattering every illusion of who he thought he was. Not just a billionaire, not just a CEO, not just a man who had everything. He was about to become a father. His breath is uneven, his hands trembling. And then, the doors open. Emily is there, weak, exhausted, but alive. And her eyes find his. For the first time, she truly looks at him. No more silence. No more walls. Just truth. Tears well at the edges of her lashes as her voice breaks. "I never wanted to keep this from you, Damien. But you left me no choice." The weight of her words crashes into him like a tidal wave. And for the first time in his life, Damien Sinclair feels regret. The walls of the hospital room seem to close in. The distant hum of monitors. The rhythmic beep of machines. The low murmur of voices in the hallway. But for Damien, the world outside no longer exists. Because nothing matters except the woman lying in front of him, and the truth she's about to reveal. Emily looks fragile. Too fragile. A stark contrast to the woman he once knew. The woman who had stood beside him, through everything, before she vanished from his life. Her fingers tremble as she grips the edge of the hospital blanket, as if steadying herself for the weight of her own words. And then, finally, she speaks. Her voice is quiet, measured, but there is an unmistakable pain laced beneath each syllable. "Damien, you need to know the truth." His breath catches. Truth. A simple word. Yet, suddenly, it feels more dangerous than anything he has ever faced. She swallows hard, her gaze never leaving his. "I didn't leave because I wanted to." A pause. A single beat of silence. Then, "I was forced out of your life." The words cut like a blade, slow and excruciating. Damien stiffens. His jaw tightens. His fists curl at his sides. Forced? What does she mean? "I was pregnant when I left," she whispers, her voice barely above a breath. "I was carrying your child." The air is sucked from his lungs. He can't breathe. He can't move. A sharp ringing fills his ears, drowning out the sound of his own pulse hammering in his chest. Pregnant. She was pregnant. His child. Their child. And he never knew. His world tilts, the foundation of everything he thought he understood crumbling beneath him. No. This doesn't make sense. If she was pregnant, why didn't she tell him? Why didn't she fight? Unless... Her lips tremble as she forces herself to continue. And with each word, the truth unravels in front of him like a nightmare. "Richard, he made sure you never found out." Damien freezes. Richard, his most trusted business partner, his right-hand man, the man he once called family. The betrayal tastes bitter on his tongue, and suddenly, the air in the room feels suffocating. Emily's gaze darkens. "He made sure you believed I was after your money, that I was using you. He manipulated everything. Every conversation, every email, every moment of doubt you ever had." She exhales, and when she speaks again, her voice is laced with something else. Resignation. "I tried to tell you. I wanted to. But by the time I realized what he had done, it was too late. You already believed him." A hollow chuckle escapes her lips, one that doesn't hold even a trace of amusement. "And I knew," her voice catches. "I knew you would never believe me over him." The weight of her words is suffocating. Damien can't speak. He can't move. Because deep down, he knows she's right. A memory flashes. Richard, sitting across from him in his office, eyes filled with false concern. "Damien, you need to protect yourself. Women like Emily, they see your wealth as an opportunity." Another memory. Emily, standing in their home, eyes brimming with unshed tears, voice desperate. Damien, please, you have to believe me. And what had he done? He had turned away, walked out, and left her alone. His stomach churns. He had thought he had won back then. Thought he had come out on top. He had the business, the assets, the house. But now, standing in this sterile hospital room, looking at the woman he once loved, the mother of his unborn child, he realizes the truth. He didn't win. He lost. And worst of all, he had let it happen. His hands tremble, rage bubbling in his chest. Not at Emily, not at himself, but at the man who had orchestrated it all. Richard. The betrayal burns, raw and unforgiving. His empire, his success, it was all built on a lie that had cost him everything. And now, he had to make it right. Damien's footsteps echo through the glass-paneled hallways of his corporate empire. His empire. But now, it feels tainted, poisoned by the very man he trusted most. Richard, the man who stole his happiness. The man who engineered his downfall, not in business, but in the one place that truly mattered, his heart. Damien doesn't hesitate, doesn't knock. He storms into Richard's office, shoving the door open with a force that rattles the walls. The man behind the desk barely flinches. Richard leans back in his chair, an amused smirk curling at his lips. Ah, Damien, I was wondering when you put the pieces together. The arrogance in his tone is infuriating. Damien's hands curl into fists. He could hit him, right here, right now. But no, he has something far more devastating planned. The truth. You took everything from me. His voice is low, controlled, but the anger beneath it burns. Richard chuckles, tapping his pen on the desk. No, Damien, you gave it away. I just helped you see what you wanted to see. A sickening twist of manipulation. Damien grits his teeth. You destroyed my marriage. You made me believe Emily betrayed me. You let me walk away from the woman carrying my child. Richard's smirk falters just slightly, and that's when Damien strikes. I want you out. Every contract, every deal, every percentage of stock you own in this company, gone. Richard stiffens. Excuse me? Damien steps closer. You heard me. You think you built this empire with me? No. I built it, and now you're done. Richard scoffs, but there's an edge of uncertainty in his eyes now. You can't just... Damien tosses a folder onto the desk. A thick, airtight legal document. You forged contracts, laundered money through the company. I had my team dig deep, deeper than you ever expected. Richard's face pales. Damien leans in, voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You didn't just betray me. You stole from me. And now, I'm making sure you lose everything. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. For the first time in his life, Richard looks trapped. And Damien? Damien feels something he hasn't felt in a long time. Control. Security. Justice. But most of all, clarity. Because this was never about revenge. It was about redemption. And now, there's only one place he needs to be. Not here. Not in this office. But with her. With his child. The drive is a blur. The corridors of the hospital stretch endlessly before him. But then, there she is, Emily, sitting by the window, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. She doesn't turn when he enters, doesn't acknowledge his presence, but she knows he's there. Damien swallows the lump in his throat. This is it. No business negotiations. No calculated moves. Just him and her. He exhales, stepping closer. I don't expect you to forgive me, he says, voice raw, unsteady. But I need you to know, I will be here. For you. For our child. No matter what. Silence. A long, aching silence. Then, slowly, Emily turns. Her eyes meet his, hesitant, wary. But there's something else there, too. A flicker of something fragile. Something not yet broken. She studies him for a moment. Then prove it. The words hit him. A challenge. A second chance. And for the first time in a long time, Damien knows exactly what he has to do. Weeks later, the hospital room is filled with light. The air hums with quiet anticipation. And then, a sound. The first cry of a newborn. Damien's breath hitches. His vision blurs. His hands tremble as the nurse gently places the tiny, fragile form into his arms. His child, his son. Tears slip down his face. The weight of him, the warmth, the reality, is overwhelming. He looks up. Emily watches him, a quiet softness in her gaze. Hesitant, hopeful. You did prove it, she whispers. A heartbeat of silence. Then, Damien leans forward, pressing the softest kiss to his son's forehead. A man who once had everything, only to lose it all. And now, he holds something far more valuable than wealth, power, or status. A future, a second chance, a family. And in the silence, one final thought lingers. Sometimes the greatest fortune a man can have is love. Sometimes the greatest losses lead to the most unexpected blessings. What would you have done in Damien's shoes? Comment your thoughts below. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. More incredible stories coming soon.